I think we'll go ahead and get started. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, good. I would think so. It's a nice small room. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Knapp, and I'm the Director of Historical Services for the American Battle Monuments Commission. And it's my privilege to welcome all of you here today for a preview of what's in store for ABMC in 2023. ABMC will mark its centennial year in early March of 2023. For 100 years, the dedicated men and women of the ABMC have worked daily to ensure that the service, achievements, and sacrifice of America's armed forces overseas will be remembered and honored. Central to that mission has been keeping alive the memory of those who died overseas and are buried or memorialized in our 26 overseas cemeteries. We're honored to carry out this noble mission and to renew the nation's promise to ensure, in the words of General of the Army's John J. Pershing, that time will not dim the glory of their deeds. As a reminder, please, for our Q&A at the end of the program, today's event is about ABMC's Centennial Commemoration, so we'd like to keep the questions and discussion focused in that area to cover as much as possible what we can in the time available, and we appreciate everybody's cooperation on that front. We do also welcome questions from our audience joining via the live stream. Direct message us right from your preferred viewing platform, be it Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, and we'll try to get to as many as we can during today's program. Without further ado, I will begin today by introducing ABMC's chairman, retired Army Lieutenant General Mark P. Hertling. Chairman Hertling is a 1975 graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, who served more than 37 years in the U.S. Army as a tanker and cavalryman. He is a combat veteran of Desert Storm and the war in Iraq, where he served as an assistant division commander in Baghdad, and as the commander of the 1st Armored Division and Multinational Task Force Iron in northern Iraq. Chairman Hertling was appointed to the American Battle Monuments Commission in November 2021 and named chairman in December of that year. He spent the past year in his role working to ensure that the agency and its efforts continue to fulfill the commitment made by ABMC's first chairman, General of the Army's John J. Pershing, "The time will not dim the glory of their deeds," to include leading ABMC into its next century of service in 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, Chairman Hertling.
Thank you, Mike. Well, I'm slow getting up here. I have to apologize. First of all, I broke my leg a few months back riding a bicycle. So please don't push me too much because I'll fall over. But I want to first start off by saying thank you for all of you for joining us this morning. This is a very important event as we anticipate the start of our 100th year commemoration in 2023. It's a true pleasure. I've only met a few of you in the coffee hour beforehand, but I found what a diverse and fascinating group of people that are connected in one way or another with honoring our nation and our nation's military in a variety of ways. So thank you for being here. Someone asked me this morning, what is ABMC? And I said, well, while they were scarfing down the free donuts and the coffee back there, I said, well, that's not the appropriate question. The appropriate question is, who is ABMC? As Mike just said, in 1923, Chief of Staff of the Army, General John Pershing, became the first chairman of a congressionally mandated organization called the American Battlefield Monuments Commission. Pershing, at that time, was charged with leading the organization as the nation tried to figure out, excuse me, what to do with the over 100,000 soldiers who had been temporarily buried on the battlefields of Europe. America had never had an issue like that before. You know, we had had wars before where bodies were shipped back to parents and loved ones, but in World War I, it was very different because of the size and scope of this. And at the same time, by the way, not only was there the issue of what to do with the bodies, but as a soldier myself, I can tell you this happens. Soldiers tend to erect memorials to their actions everywhere. And it's an uncoordinated action, usually. So Pershing also had to get that under his control and made the decision that he would only build monuments, and we have now over 30 of them in various overseas sites. Monuments would be built to campaigns or large army movements. So really, Pershing's task in 1923 was to honor those who died while preserving the public memory of those hundreds of thousands of people who had served on foreign soil. And he also had the task to coordinate the monuments, as I just said. So that's how it all started. That's what ABMC is. Now let's talk a little bit about the who. In those early days, it was interesting because obviously after the war, the mourners were the mothers, the fathers, the spouses, the children of those who had been buried at our sites overseas. It later evolved a bit into inquisitiveness as the years wore on. Not so many mourners were going to the grave sites, but the historically inquisitive were visiting the sites, taking a look around, seeing the battle and the campaign movements, and really gaining an understanding of the history of what had occurred throughout Europe initially. Then it evolved even further into local citizens, and Commissioner West and I were just talking about this, local citizens in several countries adopting graves, taking care of grave sites, having their own memorials on our Memorial Day that was often different from the one in France or Belgium. And it evolved even further. But then, over the years, the mission even expanded further than that. Today, ABMC honors Americans who have made the ultimate sacrifice in foreign wars at 26 different cemeteries around the globe and at 32 battle monuments. If you've ever been to one of our sites, you know there are rows upon rows of headstones in perfect formation. A seeming endless list of those who are missing in action are engraved on the walls of the missing at each one of our cemeteries. But along with those cemeteries, the 32 remarkably beautiful monuments are just something to behold, not only from what they talk about and what they speak to, but also the beauty of the architecture and the artwork that's connected to each one of them. We have expanded our cemeteries and our monuments to not just World War I, as Pershing was tasked to do, but now to multiple wars within our nation history. And today, those sites are not just in Europe, but they are all over the world. They are in 17 countries, on 5 continents. And it's interesting to me, one of the gardeners once told me that you realize that the sun never sets on ABMC. I've made some notes, but as ABMC initially became a place to honor our fallen, these sites have since become a way to share both our cultural and our historical heritage. That's what's happened in the first century, but now as we're about to enter the second century, we have an opportunity. Because if that's who we are, what do we do now? How do we, starting in March 2023, which is our anniversary date, how do we continue to commemorate these 26 cemeteries and 32 monuments and growing with people who may not know anything about us? While our nation has dedicated itself to the folks who rested our sites, as we begin the second 100 years, we're asking ourselves, how do we continue to create relevance with new generations? How do we tell our story, which is timeless, the sacrifice of the American fighting men and women? how do we make sure the American public continue to have the connection to this history, to our future military history, even if they are never able to personally visit one of these sites that are so far away? We have no cemeteries here in the United States. Those are run by the VA. So if an American citizen never has the opportunity to go overseas, how do we inform the next generation about what we do and the sacrifice and the heritage of those who went before us? So in the next 100 years, as we plan and have a vision for a new century of honoring those who have sacrificed so much, we plan to expand our message, open ourselves to new generations that want to learn about that cultural and military history, teach our nation that history is more than what you read in books. It's actually the individuals that perform the actions. You know, this year we welcomed 2.5 million visitors to our sites. Most of those are just at a few sites, truthfully. If I were being honest, Normandy, everyone knows Normandy, so everyone goes there. But the 2.5 million visitors have been at the other sites as well. And what's interesting is the majority of the visitors to our sites, truthfully, are not American. They are the local nationals who want to understand things better than we even do about what these people fought for and died for. We also, welcome students in small numbers, dignitaries, sometime in large numbers, tourists, soldiers who are stationed overseas and do what are called battle staff rides. I happen to have the U.S. Army record for those at 23 in Europe they were often kidding me about, so I've been to most of the battlefields in Europe. Veterans, journalists, artists, and celebrities visit our sites, people from all walks of life. They share the experience, and they want to be a part of preserving that collective history. And I tell you, I've talked to so many who have visited our sites who have come away and said, in fact, one person I talked to at Margraten said, it is a religious experience. This past month, a Dutch filmmaker found a Purple Heart that belonged to an Army PFC by the name of George Gilliland. George died on April the 18th, 1945, and this Purple Heart was engraved with his name. George, after this Dutch filmmaker did some investigation, found out that George was buried at the nearby site of his hometown, Margraten, or our Netherlands American Cemetery in the Netherlands, excuse me. After this filmmaker started doing more historical research, he learned more of PFC Gilliland's story, and he traveled to the cemetery and found that Gilliland's grave, like all the graves at Margraten, had been adopted by local Dutch citizens. Every single one of the 8,000 graves at Margraten, 8,000 plus graves at Margraten, had been adopted by a local Dutch citizen. And in fact, many times, they pass it down from generation to generation. So Gilliland talked to the individual who was the person who had adopted the grave, learned from that Dutch citizen that the brothers of Gilliland had never been to the cemetery to visit their brother's grave. So he decided to travel to Ohio, Chester, Ohio to be specific, to present that Purple Heart to the two brothers of PFC Gilliland. Both of those brothers were over 90 years old. A few weeks ago, we were also tremendously pleased to welcome the Today Show to the Brookwood American Cemetery in England. They were there to tell the story of the sinking of the World War I warship USS Jacob Jones. Now, they were there because a few months earlier, ABC News had broken the story that this ship had been found off the coast. So they had an interest in saying, well, what about the sailors who were on that ship? What happened to them? Well, what they found out was many of them were buried at Brookwood, and some of them were still on the wall of the missing because of that ship sinking. But in doing the story, the people of the Today Show found that ABMC is the custodian of not only of those who are rest in our sites and those on the wall, but they also work with the POWMIA transfer group to bring every year new remains back to the United States or to cemeteries in other places. There are literally thousands of stories, hundreds of thousands of stories like those two. I've learned some of those stories as a commander in Europe doing staff rides and visiting those graves, visiting those sites. But since being a part, and I think Secretary DeJoux would share this with me, we were on a trip last Memorial Day together, and in a 2-day period, we learned more stories that just brought tears to our eyes. Stories of nurses with PTSD from World War I. Stories of the first tanker. I'm a tanker, so that interested me quite a bit. That is buried at Suresnes Cemetery in Paris. The Lafayette Escadrille, where Americans joined forces with French, early aviation enthusiasts, to basically build the first aircraft squadron. And they were learning as they went. There's some sad stories associated with that too. Eugene Bullard, who was the first African-American pilot, did not become part of the Lafayette Escadrille because of racism. So he flew with the French and garnered quite a bit of a reputation himself. So all of that said, this coming year, we have plans to energize and expand the message and the stories of those thousands of individuals who are buried in our graves as a means to attract a younger and perhaps less informed audience in both the American and international community. We will do that through new devices like social media tools, connections with print and visual journalists like some of you in the room today, new publications, expanded interpretive centers at many of our sites, extensive outreach to folks like you that are doing similar work, students and institutes of higher learning, history departments at colleges to try and persuade them to do more, veteran service organizations, which are critically important, and even an idea to bring it to cruise ships and airlines, so as they dock in ports on tourists, if they happen to be near one of our cemetery, that's included in the tourism package. Our goal is to tell the ABMC story with passion, emotion, and historical relevance, which is, by coincidence, connected to the many people who sacrificed their lives. We're hoping that through all this, many of you will join so you can help us and we can help you. And we're hoping that we can all together tell these stories, because that's the real reason we invited you today, and that's who ABMC is. Thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to continued partnerships with all of you, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come listen to a little bit of our story. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Hertling. For the past year, we've been working together with Northern Lights Productions to produce a documentary film in honor of our Centennial. Their team has traveled to a number of our sites to capture the passion of our teams, as well as the mission that drives them. What we've seen develop on screen is a remarkable encapsulation of the marriage between preservation and progress that is reflected in our Centennial commemoration. While the film shares some very powerful stories from our past 100 years, it also looks forward at our mission into the future and at the individuals who make that happen every day. The documentary will premiere in 2023, but we wanted to share a preview with you today. So having said that, let's take a quick look at that.
Welcome to the Ardennes American Cemetery. We're one of 3 American cemeteries here in Belgium. Our American overseas military cemeteries are really special because each one is unique, yet each one serves the same function, and that's to honor our brave American soldiers who fought and died long ago for the liberties, freedoms that we enjoy today. We have 5,300 plus interments, and it was an identification laboratory at the end of World War II. A lot of soldiers' bodies throughout the world, from the Pacific Theater of Operations and the European Theater of Operations, were sent here for identification purposes. Today we have close to 800 unknowns buried here for that very reason. Closure is so important to families. There are families today who are still awaiting the location where their loved ones are interred. And there are also families where the family members have been buried with a Christian cross when they should have been buried with a Jewish Star of David. Tomorrow, at this particular site, we will be changing the headstones of 2 American soldiers who were identified as being Jewish versus of the Christian faith. So that is just an indicator of how ABMC is working with other federal agencies and other organizations to do the right thing.
Someone once said that our flag, our American flag, does not fly because the wind moves it. Our flag flies with the last breath of each soldier who died protecting it. And it is precisely this that brings us here today.
These Latin crosses that will be removed today are not symbols that we say good riddance to. Rather, we bid them a fond farewell. We lower our heads in gratitude and respect to these silent civil sentinels who have so majestically stood guard over these young men for all of these decades.
For all kinds of understandable and legitimate reasons, a number of American Jewish soldiers who were killed during the Second World War were buried under Latin crosses. Working together with the ABMC, whom we have found to be extraordinarily helpful, supportive, and respectful, we have embarked on an effort to right this historical wrong. Second Lieutenant Kenneth Earl Robinson, on behalf of the citizens of the United States of America, we thank you for your service. And Kenneth, on behalf of the Jewish people, we welcome you home.
There are many people here with me, my dear family who wanted to join with their old mother and grandmother in her joy, and most of all, my dad, Ed Robinson. I feel him here with me, telling me, good job. Thank you so much.
Yiskadal v'yiskadash shmei Rabba, Yamad yivrach Yerusei v'yamich malchusei.
Closure. Closure is what it's all about. Whether you're identifying a soldier that's lay in an unmarked grave over the years, or a soldier who's lain in a grave with the wrong headstone. Closure to the families means a lot to our agency. I get goosebumps talking about it, because it's important to us to know that we've done the right thing. We are here to support the families.
So having seen that, that's just a taste of what we can expect coming up in 2023. And I think you can see from that that the final production is going to be much more powerful and moving, if that's at all possible. I would now like to introduce the Secretary of the American Battle Monuments Commission, Charles K. Dejoux. Secretary Dejoux was appointed to serve in this role this past May by President Joseph R. Biden. The 20-year Army veteran has served in Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom in 2011 and 2012, in addition to many other assignments. He represented Hawaii's 1st Congressional District as a member of Congress, serving on the House Armed Services Committee and House Budget Committees. Secretary Dejoux has been an active civic leader in the Hawaii State House of Representatives and Honolulu City Council, and has served as an educator at both the University of Hawaii and Hawaii Pacific University. Since his appointment, Secretary Dejoux has worked to set the agency on the path for a new century of service focused on the seamless integration of the ABMC's core mission with emerging technology and focused engagement. Please join me in welcoming ABMC Secretary Charles K. Dejoux.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very, very much for joining us. On behalf of myself, Chair Hertling, the ABMC Commission, and the Commander-in-Chief, President Biden, I want to welcome all of you to the Centennial kickoff for the ABMC. Before I begin, I'd like to recognize a few important people we have here. I'm delighted, in addition to Chairman Mark Hertling, we have 2 of our agency's commissioners joining us here this morning. If you haven't met them, please say hello to them. We have Commissioner Gail Berry West and Commissioner Matt Jones, who are sitting with us here in the front row. And on the heels of that wonderful video, I also want to take a moment to recognize Shalom Lamb, who comes with us with Operation Benjamin. He joins us all the way from Jerusalem in Israel. His Operation Benjamin team has been an integral part of the ABMC and helping us get things right and redesignate some of our Latin crosses to Jewish stars as appropriate for some of our soldiers. And so Shalom, thank you very much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past century, the ABMC has been honored to preserve the sacrifice, to preserve the recognition of the sacrifice of America's armed services. What our agency has been doing for the past century, at what I view as our agency's mission has been, is to make sure that we honor our past and the sacrifices made by America's service members, that we give meaning to American values of today, and that our agency provides proof positive of the hope of America's future. That is what we have been doing for the past century, and what I am so excited as we look forward into our next century of continuing, furthering, and deepening. In my remarks here this morning, I'd like to just share with you a couple of exciting things that the agency is planning in 2023. We, as the chairman had already mentioned, look at expanding our visitor outreach and having more individuals, particularly Americans, come and visit our sites. We are very excited that in 2023, we'll be opening our 10th visitor center. This time it's going to be opened at the Netherlands American Cemetery. We will be welcoming individuals, hopefully right in time for the 2023 Memorial Day. As we move forward, our agency is also looking at expanding a number of innovative solutions and innovative practices for our agency to reach out to more Americans, using technology as well as incorporating matters that we combat problems with age and weathering. This coming year, we're looking at shoring up and restoring our Pointe-du-Hoc Memorial in France, which is part of the D-Day landing fields. Also, in this centennial year, our agency is working and cooperating with the Smithsonian. This coming year, we're looking forward with the cooperation of the Smithsonian Museum of American Art to producing a book commemorating the art and the wonderful creative features of the ABMC and America and the American people. Our cemeteries have started what we call a Faces of exhibition at our cemeteries. This is something we're going to continue to expand to show not just the crosses and stars of David in our cemeteries, but to also place a marker next to them, showing the soldiers and giving a little bit about their lives and explaining what they did and who they were. And it is more than just a marker in a field, but real human beings who sacrificed on behalf of our country and our nation's values. We have been cooperating with, and this coming year, look forward to working with, the Police de Charlotte Museum in Paris. We have a couple of wonderful art pieces that are going to be shown there, one of which is a Sioux warrior chief head that was painted on one of our first fighter planes in World War I as part of the Lafayette Escadrille. This is a squadron of Americans who volunteered to fight with the French before America's entrance into World War I. That is going to be exhibited. And we also have a wonderful painting by artist Tom Schneck also being exhibited there, showing American sacrifices, and it comes from American Legion's Paris Post 1 that our agency has been cooperating with. Another exciting feature that we have coming up in our centennial year. But friends, I think what I really want to convey to all of you and what we have coming up and what we have here at the ABMC is that I realize that here in our nation, there's sometimes a little bit too much rancor in American politics. I know a lot of Americans express a lot of frustration about what's going on in our nation's government. I realize and recognize that there are many out there in the world who may watch and see increasing authoritarianism growing in Russia or in China. And I think there's a lot of people, both here within the United States as well as around the world, who may question whether or not America still has it within itself, who may doubt whether or not American values are the values that can be sustained and carried forward into the future. And I think there may be a lot who may wonder whether or not the United States of America is still the nation and the world's last best hope. For all those who doubt, for all those who question, for all those who wonder whether or not the American people and the United States of America still has it within us, I say to all of you, come. Come to the ABMC. Come to one of our 26 cemeteries and 32 memorials spread through 12 different countries around the world. I say to all the doubters, all the questioners, all those who question and ponder and wonder about the values of the United States of America and the American people, I say to you, come. Come and walk on the beaches of Normandy. Come, touch the marble of our Stars of David and our crosses in Tunisia. Come, read the names of the walls of the missing in Manila. Come to any one of our sites and come and see that for all who doubt, all who question, all who wonder about the United States of America and whether or not we have it, come to the ABMC and you will see that the values of honor, duty, and sacrifice still remain within us in the United States, and we at the ABMC are so incredibly honored to preserve, perpetuate, and continue these values and remind the world and remind the American people that yes, we do, we still have it. And for that, I am so excited that after 100 years of preserving this legacy, we look forward to our next 100 years. And why I am so excited that each and every one of you are here and spread this message of our next 100 years. And with that, I want to thank each and every one of you. May God bless each and every one of you. May God bless the United States of America. Happy holidays, and as we say in my home state, Mele Kalikimaka. Thank you.
I was disappointed disappointed in the secretary. He didn't open with aloha.
Mahalo, Secretary. And now I'd like to go ahead and open up the floor to questions. Just as a quick reminder, we do plan to keep the question session today focused on our Centennial Commemoration. However, if there are any additional questions that veer beyond that, we're more than happy to route them through our capable public affairs team that are here today. I'll make sure that we can get you in contact, and we will get you an answer on those. But I'd like to stay focused on the Centennial today. So having said that, if anybody has any questions, we'd like to begin. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Fred Lash with the Korean War Veterans Association. And a thought occurred to me, I suspect there is something like this that is operational, but a tour, as it were, of as many of the 26 cemeteries as possible. Is there any group that ever takes that on to task to try to take a group of people, Americans, that have never seen these cemeteries off to see at least half of those in an organized tour type situation?
I'll take it. There are several pay-for groups that do battle staff rides, mostly centered on the more famous battlefields in Europe, because it's actually, they actually do the tours of the cemeteries, but they also have a good time, as you can imagine. I could name 3 or 4 different contractors that do those kind of tours. They're either walking tours, bus tours, or cycling tours. But no, we don't specifically have anything like that. Yeah.
Could I see you afterwards for a couple of ideas?
Sure.
On that?
Absolutely.
Please do, please do.
Yeah, as a follow-on to that, what we have noticed as well is that almost all of these battlefield tours in Europe generally stop at a cemetery. As was mentioned earlier, Normandy being the most popular, but for several months when I was at a cemetery on the Somme in northern France, which is not much visited by Americans at all, we had a lot of tours go through there, both British as well as American, that were on their way to somewhere else, but they generally make a point to stop. Any additional questions? Yes, sir.
So, Levi's Auto with the Non-Commissioned Officers Association. First, pleasure to be here. Thank you for hosting this. It's wonderful. It's great to meet all of you. Statement, I thought the pictures next to the headstones was an amazing idea. I think that putting a face to the headstone is awesome. Is that a permanent thing? And if so, is that happening at all 26 locations?
It is. We've rolled it out at a few of our cemeteries. This is something we're looking forward at expanding. And yes, we would like to eventually get to the point where we roll that out to all 26 of our cemeteries. So this is a project that has started and is now going to expand into our Centennial year.
If I can share a vignette, the secretary and I, the first place they rolled it out was the Suresnes Cemetery, which is outside of Paris. It may not be at every grave site, because obviously there's sometimes the lack of pictures, but they had started doing it at Suresnes last Memorial Day. The first picture I saw, I think I mentioned it, was of a tanker. His name was Rocky, very appropriate. And they showed he was the first armored soldier, that NCO, that was killed in action in World War I in a tank. So those are the kinds of stories. There's another one at that same cemetery. I mentioned the 2 sisters, the twin sisters, the Crowell sisters, who actually committed suicide due to PTSD, twin sisters who had volunteered to be nurses in the American Red Cross. A sad story, but just those are the kind of things that show up in these pictures, and they are actually kind of spattered throughout the cemetery, so you can kind of get a feel for who's buried there and what they did. But that's a great question.
We have an online question. Is there a plan for virtual tours?
I'm sorry, visual?
Is there a plan for virtual tours?
Yes, yes, yes. That also is an initiative that our agency is launching. We do, next year, are going to be launching a new website. We have photos up already of all of our sites. We invite all of you and all of your organizations, please do come visit abmc.gov. And we are rolling out virtual tours of our sites. This is actually something that has always been percolating. COVID advanced things along a little bit more, but it's something that we are very excited about to be able to share the story of all of our soldiers and the stories of our cemeteries and memorials.
Other questions? We have another online question. Did COVID impact attendance at your site? And if so, have you returned to pre-COVID levels?
The answer is yes. COVID affected us just like it did everybody else in America and throughout the world. It did dramatically reduce our visitor counts. This past year, I understand we are almost right back at our pre-COVID levels, such that the year 2022, we expect approximately the same number of visitors as we had in 2019. We are hopeful in 2023 we will be exceeding our pre-COVID levels. And let me emphasize to everybody here, all of our cemeteries and memorials are open now. None are shut down currently because of COVID. Do want to invite all of you, invite the public. Please do come, and it is at no charge, at no cost, as it has been.
We have more online questions. Will there be a Faces of Mark Groton this year? We missed it for 3 years.
I'm not sure if we made a decision yet on whether or not there's going to be a Faces of Mark Groton. That is something that unfortunately, because of COVID, we had a little bit of turbulence with the Liberation Day concert. Unfortunately, it had gotten canceled for a couple of years. We are looking forward to going back and doing that again. For those of you who are not familiar with Mark Groton and the Netherlands American Cemetery, this is one of our largest cemeteries. It recognizes the service and sacrifice of the Americans with not just Operation Market Garden, but also with the Battle of the Bulge. We have enjoyed a very positive relationship between the Dutch people and the ABMC and the American people at this site. So we look forward to returning to what was happening at that particular site before COVID. This past year, we did have a Liberation Day concert at the Netherlands American Cemetery. Unfortunately, due to rain, not due to COVID, the concert got canceled. But I'm cautiously optimistic that in 2023, we will have it again, and we're not going to get it rained out, and there's not going to be COVID, and we'll be back. We'll be back in business.
Hi, Mary Coik with the American Battlefield Trust. You're surrounded by many friends today from other organizations who share your vision. How can we help you as you're getting ready to have this anniversary? What can we do to support you and spread the word?
I'll start, and I'm sure the secretary will add more, and the historian might even add some more too. It is really an understanding of ABMC and what it is, who we are, what we do. It's interesting to me, having served in the military, I once had when I was appointed to the commission, I once had a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs say, ABMC, what's that? And so it is just a lack of understanding and just a personal touch with our sites. What we're asking all of you to do, if you can, publicize the anniversary, the second century. We will be pushing articles, films, our websites, social media. We just ask you to share that. And I think based on this, this is one of the first time we've come together with so many like-minded groups. I think there's some synergy that we may find in this room where not only can you help us just by information, but perhaps we can help you and share some additional thoughts on how we can pull together like the American Battlefield Trust.
Let me just add on to what Chair Hertling was saying. Let me offer several things for those who would like to help and further the ABMC's mission into the next century. First, above all else, is if you have the time and you have the wherewithal, please come and visit us at one of our sites overseas. Make it a point in the year 2023. You yourself, or if not, encourage a member of your family to come visit one of our cemeteries or memorials around the world.
If I can share one more thing on that, two anecdotes, if I may. My sister and her husband were going on a cruise in the Med, and one of their ports was Rome and Anzio, and I said, hey, you ought to visit one of our cemeteries there. I said, why would we visit a cemetery on a cruise? I said, trust me. So I sent them the film that's on our website about both the cemetery in Florence and the cemetery in Naples. They went. My sister's big into art and interior design. She said it was the best day of the cruise visiting that cemetery, which you don't normally hear from people who are looking to stuff themselves on some carnival ship. But they took a couple of friends that they had met on the cruise to the sites, saying, trust us. My brother said to go there, so let's go there. And it was one of their favorite memories. I'm going to go back to what the secretary said about Margraten, because you think cemeteries sort of emotion. My wife and I have been married for 47 years, spent 38 years in the military. If you were to ask her what was her favorite memory, because someone did once, and it surprised me that she said this, what was her favorite memory of our time in service? She said, Christmas Eve at Margraten. Because she got to meet some of the people that adopted the graves. She got to hear the story of the city of Margraten that cared for the Netherlands American Cemetery. And I would almost have to agree with her that we spent 12 years in Europe, and that was our most memorable event.
I would like to echo their comments that, you know, the biggest thing that you can do is to help us get out there with the American public. As everybody has highlighted in their remarks earlier today, with our sites being in Europe, we don't have a problem getting Europeans to visit us. They have school groups that go generally every year to our cemeteries all across the world. But we need more Americans to know about us, and this is the perfect time to do that. And I would say, again, to something that the chairman said, the things that you can do to help us, we may be able to help you. For our Centennial, we're working on a Centennial volume in cooperation with the Smithsonian American Art Museum, highlighting all the art, architecture, horticultural design at our sites around the world. And in the course of that, the folks at the Smithsonian came to us and said, you know, you've told us stuff we didn't know about things in our collection, because they directly related to our artwork. So any kind of collaboration that we can do with you is certainly a benefit to us, and it may benefit you as well, as you said, sir.
I don't want to hog the microphone, but I have one kind of a colorful anecdotal story regarding Americans that don't know about these. I've traveled a lot in France. I'm an American historian on World War I and World War II, and I've been to a lot of the sites in France and Luxembourg where Patton's buried and all that. So I'm a real disciple of ABMC. Recently, I was on a sort of a religious pilgrimage trip, organized trip tour, and it included, as you would think, Florence, of course. We were heading south on the bus, and the tour guide hadn't said much about it. I thought for sure with Anzio and the drive to Rome and all that, there'd be an American battlefield cemetery somewhere. So we're going down the highway, and I look over and I see a couple of American flags, and is that the one you're talking about? Oh, yes, that's the American cemetery. I said, yeah, part of the ABMC network. She didn't know what that was. I said, can we find an exit ramp and get back and go over there and see that? It's sort of hijacking the bus a little bit. And she said, well, I guess so. We have some time. So let's do that, because I think nobody on that bus, all the other 45 people, had ever been to American Cemetery in Europe. And they all went away with tears in their eyes. So I think I made some disciples along the religious way and got that done. But just a side point that you're right, people haven't seen it. And I think they need more. We'll help them
to your
find
point,
out more.
though, I'm going to brag on the secretary because he's been all over. But as the Korean Veterans Association would find it interesting that the secretary was one of the few Americans that went to the Korean Battle Monument in Busan, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
But before I go in terms of how all of you can help us, let me also just put one more thing. Every single person here in this room, before you leave this room today, this morning, you can do something to help us. Because my hunch is every single person here in the room has one of these things. It's a cell phone. And I don't care which social media platform you like or you use, or it's Facebook or it's Twitter or TikTok, well, I don't know, whatever people use these days here. But every single one of you, before you exit that door, just send out a tweet, a post, something that says you came to this event here today For the ABMC, it's hashtag USABMC on Twitter, and just let everybody know about it. So you're asking about what you can do to help, that very small thing will take you 30 seconds, and you will help our agency. And it's something you can do to help us before you exit that door today. Thank you.
We have online questions. Are there sites here in the US we can visit as well?
The ABMC, the focus of our agency is primarily with our cemeteries and memorials overseas outside the United States, but we do run a few memorials inside the United States. We have the East Coast Memorial located at Battery Park in New York City, a West Coast Memorial located in San Francisco, and we have the Honolulu Memorial in my home state of Hawaii, which I'm very excited to let all of you know. We are beginning the plans of expanding and creating a new visitor center in the Honolulu Memorial located in Punch Bowl on the island of Oahu in Hawaii.
And there's one more, about
Yes,
a mile from here.
Oh, yeah.
The World War I
World War,
Memorial, which is yeah. I'm not from Washington, so I don't know where we are, but it's that way, I think, somewhere that way. Okay, so maybe take a look at that as you walk out, and it's being renovated right now. It's a beautiful site with a tribute to General Pershing and the campaigns of World War I, as well as some soon-to-be statues and murals that are part of that memorial.
Let me just also add, the ABMC, we built the Korean War Memorial, as well as also the World War II Memorial, in addition to the World War I Memorial. Those were constructed by our agency, but today are operated by the National Park Service. So if you go, I don't know which direction. Okay, that way. So the World War II and Korean War, you can see that was ABMC's handiwork, but I give credit to the National Park Service for maintaining those today.
Any other questions?
I have one final one from online, and it's for each of you on the panel. Which site has particular meaning to you or features art or architecture that is particularly powerful?
Who's your favorite child?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer. I know whatever I say, whatever I answer, I'm going to get in trouble to the superintendent, who I didn't mention. For me, I mean, all of them are special. All of them are wonderful. All of them are breathtaking. And I really want to emphasize to all of you here, do go visit our sites. Pick any one of them. It will take your breath away. For myself personally, because I am from the state of Hawaii and grew up in the Pacific, I think one site that maybe perhaps has a little bit more meaning to me compared to the others is our American Cemetery in Manila. And it is not just because it is architecturally beautiful, not just because when you look at the Latin crosses and the Stars of David, it takes your breath away. I think for me, it also has additional meaning because I think it reflects the best of our nation. Because if you walk in the Manila American Cemetery, when you go and see those crosses and those Stars of David, you will see not just American names. You will also see Filipino names. You will see the Filipinos who fought side by side with the Americans to repel the Japanese invasion of the Philippines. And you will see that the United States, we make no distinction based on rank or ethnicity or whether you were an American or a Filipino. If you wore our uniform and carried our arms, we bury you side by side with our American soldiers there in Manila. And I think for me, that has a profound sense of meaning and gives meaning to what we value as Americans.
Yeah, I would say the vista at Normandy is absolutely beautiful, not just the cemetery, but the Pont de Hoc and just the grounds around that are so historically magnificent that is one of my favorites. I'm with the chairman, I can't name one. Margrotten, as I said before, is probably both the favorite of my wife and I. I think for architectural beauty and for meaning, the two cemeteries in Rome, or outside of Rome, both Naples and Florence, are just the artwork as well as the presence. I am coveting going to the cemetery in Tunisia because First of all, it's connected to the 1st Armored Division because of so many that were part of those early battles of World War II that died there. The Lafayette Escadrille is magnificent. Surin because of its history. I mean, the Philippines, Mexico, Panama.
They're all good. They're all good.
They're all pretty neat. They're all pretty neat. Don't get stuck at Normandy because that's beautiful, but it's just a gateway to so many others.
Yeah, I would have to say, after working with my colleagues in historical services and our colleagues at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, my joke is I've turned my military historian into an art historian. There is so much phenomenal artwork, everything from sculpture to mosaic to stained glass to the architectural design at every one of our sites. Every one of our sites. They all have multiple levels to recommend them. And to the chairman's point, they're all beautiful, every single one of them. If I'm forced to say a couple things that strike me, I won't even say my favorites. I'm a World War I guy, so I'm really biased. But the Meuse-Argonne American Cemetery, which is our largest cemetery in Europe, is not only gorgeous and immaculate for someplace in northern France, right near Verdun, where it's probably really miserable right now, but the vistas rolling up over the hillside of the crosses and the graves. And this is, all our cemeteries are on the ground that was actually fought over. So that's something that is incredibly moving when you go to these sites. And personally, I am slightly biased. I won't say I have a favorite, but I'm slightly biased for the Somme American Cemetery, which is way up in the north. It's very small, but much like Flanders Field Cemetery, which is also small, about 400 and some burials, these two little, I don't want to say isolated, but sort of removed from the rest of the World War I theater cemeteries are just gorgeous little gems. And they're not very often visited by Americans, but every one of them is worth a visit. There, you will find something at any one of our cemeteries that will move you and inspire you. And there's also some really good art. So, much like your sister, sir, if you're on a cruise, if you're on a tour and you're somewhere anywhere near one of our places, don't think you got to go there for military history, and don't think you're going to a cemetery and it's going to ruin your trip, because it's going to amplify the beauty of your trip. And that's all I have to say.
On that note, too, if you check our ABMC website, there is a sub-page for cemeteries and memorial, and there's a short YouTube video on each one of our sites. Those short 2-minute videos on each site are pretty magnificent. They give you a feel for the place. They're all taken in the summertime. And what I would tell you is one of the more moving experiences I had, I forgot to mention this one, is the Ardennes Cemetery near Bastogne. Go there in the winter and experience the weather that those soldiers and military personnel experienced during the Battle of the Bulge. You will never forget that. I think I still have frostbitten toes on that.
All right, well, I want to thank you all again for joining us today as we kick off our centennial anniversary for the American Battle Monuments Commission. We look forward to working with each and every one of you together in 2023 and in the years to come to commemorate the fallen and to honor their sacrifices. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.